Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. has now provided Russia with a written response to its security demands. The U.S. will not agree to permanently ban Ukraine from joining NATO, as Russia had been seeking. Secretary Blinken said the U.S. is, quote, open to dialogue, however. But it is upping its defenses of Ukraine in preparation for a Russian invasion. And President Biden warned of the potential of personal sanctions against Russian President Vladimir Putin if there is an attack. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini joins me now. Christina, the Secretary of State says that the U.S. delivered these written responses to Russia addressing their grievances. What does this document say? How was it delivered, and is it going to change anything?
He wouldn't go into details. He was asked at point blank range about that issue you just discussed. Does it say anywhere in there, hey, Russia, no, we're not going to keep, Ukraine from joining NATO, and no, you can't dictate who gets to join the alliance in the future. He said, look, I'm not going to go into details. We want to keep it diplomatic. We hope the Russians will do the same thing. Hint, hint, hint. Please don't leak this document. But he said, it's keeping with his public statements. And he has said very publicly over and over again that the U.S. supports Ukraine and it supports NATO's right to self-determination and Ukraine's territorial integrity. It is up to NATO who joins its alliance, not Russia, and it is up to Ukraine if it wants to try to be one of those people in the future. Now, this document was delivered to the MFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, John Sullivan. He said we're told he actually went there and delivered it in person. We're also told it's not a particularly long document. It's not 20 pages. It's shorter than that. I couldn't get an exact length. It's not signed by anybody. It is a statement from the U.S. government to the Russian government. And Secretary Blinken said, now the ball is in Russia's hands.
Interesting bit of diplomacy there with the ambassador hand delivering this document. Christina, Russia's foreign minister is now saying, if we don't receive a constructive answer from the West on our security demands, Moscow is going to take appropriate measures. So is this new document going to satisfy the Russians in any way? And have they responded yet to the substance of the U.S. document?
Well, they just got it this morning, a couple hours ago, so we haven't seen a response yet. And that's something that Secretary Blinken was asked is, are the Russians taking this seriously? Is any of this is the U.S. taking this seriously, right? Do you really expect this document to kind of hold off Russian aggression, or is it to just kind of say that you tried? And, he said it is a good faith document. It would be helpful if the Russians would reciprocate. But he's also said that it's unclear whether or not the Russians are really negotiating or whether or not all of this is political theater, political coverage for them to say we tried to negotiate with the U.S., we tried to talk to NATO, they wouldn't come down to our demands, and use it as justification to do what they were going to do anyway, which is proceed it further into Ukraine. Now, the U.S. has said that it doesn't believe that that there's any reason that diplomacy is going to fail. The Secretary Blinken said over and over again, he thinks there still are diplomatic options. But now the U.S. is saying, look, we responded to your demands. We gave you what you want. And it's up to you, Russia, whether or not you want to take this path. But they've made very clear that they're prepared for it either way.
Secretary Blinken has made a point of saying there's no daylight between NATO allies when it comes to the response to Russia. But some cracks do seem to be emerging. What are the major cracks and how serious are they?
State Department sources told me this week that, look, everybody's on the same page as to what we want to do. We want there to be big repercussions for Russia where there's no daylight on that. It's just a matter of details. But in diplomacy, it's the details that can get you in trouble. And what's standing out today is, once again, Germany. Germany, unlike other Western allies, is not allowing weapons to be shipped to Ukraine. It's not allowing its weapons to be sent to Ukraine, even by other countries. Instead, it announced today that it's going to send them a couple thousand military helmets. That was seen as almost offensive, almost worse than sending anything. The mayor of Kyiv, who's this very colorful character, he's a former competitive boxer, said, what's next? Are they going to send us pillows? Because it's just not in keeping with what we're seeing from other NATO allies, especially the Baltic states. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia have been shipping heavy weapons, U.S.-produced weapons. The U.K. has been shipping weapons, and Germany says it's not its policy. It's not going to, fuel weapons into a conflict. So instead, they sent helmets.
Helmets. Wow. Over the weekend, the State Department, as you reported, started urging the families of embassy staffers in Ukraine to start to get out. So how is that departure going? And how worried are State Department officials about the embassy employees who are still there?
Look, the Secretary made a point to address this in his remarks today, and that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, the U.S. doesn't want to be seen as evacuating this embassy because that's a show of bad faith to the Ukrainian government, right? We saw this in Afghanistan. As soon as the U.S. pulled out of the embassy, it precipitated the fall of the government in Kabul. Of course, there were a lot of other factors, but it's a really big deal, and it's a very strong signal to the domestic population when the U.S. says, we don't feel we can secure our embassy anymore, we're leaving. Secretary Blinken made it clear to say that's not what's happening. They're taking families of, dependents of State Department personnel out. They're taking some non-essential personnel out. But he said, we still have a robust operating embassy. It's still going to be there. The reason they decided to make that decision is because it was a little bit different situation. If we can pull that map back up. When the threat was in the eastern part of the country, that's really far from Kyiv, from the capital where the embassy is. The Donbass, Crimea, that's a haul. But when Putin was allowed to bring his troops into Belarus on top of Ukraine because he made a deal with the president there, Lukashenko, that's much closer to Kyiv. Like if you can see where that red border comes around the top, it's just a proximity issue, and it gives them not as much time to respond if something were to happen. So out of an abundance of caution, they're clearing some non-essential personnel. They've sent Marines and additional diplomatic security guards to reinforce the embassy, but it is still operating and it is still there, and they want to make sure the Ukrainian government gets that message loud and clear.
And what's the best way quickly for people to get out if they need to from Kyiv and the embassy?
There's a couple different ways to do it. There are two international airports. The one that you normally fly into if you're coming like from Europe or like when I've flown in there is really, really far from the embassy. I just remember the drive thinking it's never going to end, and it's across a river as well, which is really inconvenient. There is, however, another airport that's a little closer, and there's a couple little, usually local airstrips. But if you think about the problems we've had in other embassies, like evacuating Afghanistan, there was only the one airstrip. That's not the case. Look, you can also take land routes. You can't go north anymore, and you can't go you can't go east, but you can go west. Moldova, Hungary, Poland. There are places and there are ways to get out. So there's a lot more options. It's a lot more stable of a situation. And like I said, we're nowhere near there yet. There's no one talking about at this time an emergency evacuation of that embassy. However, you can bet that there is a plan, that there was one in place even before all this escalation started, and that they know how to implement it if they have to.
Fascinating insights from someone who's been there. Christina Ruffini, thanks so much.
Thanks, Nancy.